Yeah, man, I'm super happy with the way this thing is coming out, and it's just, everything's really... Did you hear that? What the heck was that? Hey! What are you doing? All right, guys, so last week we did the whole turbo setup up there, mocked up the hot side and got that all good to go. This week I want to change gears a little bit, and we're going to be working on the rear suspension. So the previous owner had done 4-link airbags and this whole C-notch setup. I don't really love it. It's kind of cool if you want to get the truck low, but that's about it. It doesn't handle good, doesn't ride great. So what we're going to do is we're going to swap in the 2015 to 2023 Mustang S550 rear suspension. And I got some plates that you bolt onto the frame, you mock stuff up, but we have a lot of fabrication to do. We have to cut this frame all apart, cut the notch out, and basically rebuild the rear half of this frame. So I'm not going to waste any time. We're going to get right into it. I'm going to get this rear end out of here and start cutting it apart. All right, now that we have that 9-inch axle and all the 4-link out of the way, we got a couple of, as you saw, some of the rivets that were left over from the old suspension. Those would be brackets. If you weren't cutting a 4-link out and you were just working with a truck that had stock suspension, at least spring still, those are rivets that were holding on the original purchase. So you're gonna have to get all that stuff off. And then what we have is these plates from ATP Designs, I believe it is. I'll put a link down in the description. But what these plates do is they bolt on to those rivet holes, and they align up, and they give you all the spots where you're going to need to cut out to make that S550 subframe fit. So you bolt the plate up, you mark everything, you take the plate back off, and then you would cut right along all the lines that you have, and then you can either do without the plate, or you can put the plate back on, weld it, however you want to do it. Obviously on here we have some extensive modifications to do, so we're going to be welding the plates back on. We have a little bit more complicated of a situation though. The fact that we have this C-notch and there's big welds on here, the C-notch isn't exactly centered. I got to get these things out of here before I can even think about getting these plates on. So I'm going to start off, we're going to mark everything. I'm going to cut the pockets out where they go. We're going to take the plate off completely, and then we're going to cut one side of the C-notch out. Put the plates back on, line them up, tack weld it, go to the other side, cut the C-notch out, and then do exactly the same. We kind of have to do it this way to make sure we keep the frame alignment in place. It's going to be a little difficult. We're going to have to take our time, go slow, make sure everything goes straight, but really nothing we can do except get right after it and just start cutting this crap out of here. victory. All right, so now we got all this cut out, got everything ground down, prepped for welding, and we're gonna get that plate bolted back on, get everything lined up. We get this mark here that's gonna help us with the forward backward of the frame, and try to get everything as squared and lined up as we can, get the plate tacked on, and then work on getting that other side all set. See how much it sprung?
What?
See how much it sprung? All right, so obviously this rear frame section moved a lot. Now this is not something you're gonna have to contend with, like I said, if you're not dealing with cutting 4-link out, but here we are having to contend with it, so we're gonna do what we have to do. I set the truck up very level. The floor in here is level. It's on jack stands nice and level. And if you go to the frame in front of where we cut with a level across the frame rails, it is perfectly level right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back here. We're going to rest it on there, and we're going to bring this up to level. And then we have to bring the frame forward to line back up with that line. So we're going to use a combination of ratchet straps and leveling the frame out, and then once we get that, we'll tighten the bolts up, and then we'll tack weld everything in place. I don't want to go too crazy welding this until we have the other side kind of mocked up too. But I want to get it strong enough where it's not going to move around on this side once we cut that side out. So let's get this thing level, get the frame in the right spot, button it all up, and then that's where I'm going to stop for tonight. Get this thing done, and then I'll see you guys in the morning. All right, guys, so last night we got that other side all mocked up, cut up, and tacked in. Tonight we're gonna get right into this side. This is gonna be the same as the other side, where you just put the 2 bolt holes in the front, line those up, 2 bolts in the back, line those up, and then mark out where you need to cut and just cut it all out. This side I have to pay a little bit more attention, because once we cut this out, since I still only have the piece of 1/4-inch plate holding the back part of the frame together, it's gonna get a little more flimsy. Once I get the subframe in and everything tied in, it's gonna stiffen it right back up, but this last piece, I gotta really make sure that I'm paying attention to squaring everything up, taking some corner-to-corner measures, and then putting the level across. And aside from that, it should go pretty smoothly. So I'm not gonna waste any time. I'm gonna get right into it, mark this up, cut it, get it tacked on, and hopefully fit the subframe up tonight. I'd like to at least get that subframe up in place, start to take my side-to-side measurements, and see how it's all gonna fit. All right, so we got that all cut out. This is the notch that's gonna clear the subframe, and then obviously this is where the C-notch was. So it's gonna bolt that plate back on, take some measurements with the level, square everything back up, double check my measurements, tack that in place, and then we should be able to get that subframe lifted up into place. All right, so now that we get this cross member lifted up into place, It's time to square it up, take a bunch of measurements, and see how it fits. Now, I'm kind of one of those firm believers in measure 100 times, cut once. Measure, measure, measure. Try to take as many reference points as you can. Make sure this thing is square. A good one to go by is the cross member that holds the body mounts on, and measure one of these upper control arm mounts on both sides. All those things are kind of fixed points on the frame. The most important thing is that this thing is square, twisted like this. You don't want to have it crab walking and going sideways down the road, so you really want to make sure this thing is as square as it can be. Then the second most important measurement is your side-to-side measurement. You really want to make sure this thing, the cross member, is centered in the frame. We had some stuff move around between cutting out the C-notches. Maybe when the person put the C-notches in, things may have moved. So we just want to make sure everything is as square as can be based off of the front half of the frame, because that's what's really important. And then we're going to go and we're going to tack weld this whole cross member into place. And before I go and finish weld everything and make all the gussets, I want to throw some wheels on it. I want to lower it down, get it sitting to ride height with a jack under the differential, and then we're going to kind of measure for our shock height, our coilover length, and we're going to see how the truck sits with this all set up in it. All right, guys, now that we get this cross member all up in here, tacked, squared, measured, everything is exactly where I want it to be, we lowered it down and we got it sitting at ride height. So I got jack stands under the frame, and I got this floor jack under the differential, only because since we only have this thing tacked in, it can still kind of move around a little bit, so I wanted to make sure that we weren't going to have any chassis sag, changing the way things were. So the next step is going to be coilovers. We got to take some measurements. I'm going to do a whole video covering coilover installation, how to measure for them, spring rates, all that kind of stuff. That's going to be the next video. But for now, I just want to take a rough measurement. And what we got to do is you got to measure eye to eye on where it's going to be. So we're using the shock mount, and you want to measure where the center of the eye would be on the coilover shock to right about where it wants to mount. And we're going to put brackets here. Now, part of it is you want to kind of get as much angle as you can. I'll explain the science behind that in the next video, but you want to get the shock tipped in a little bit. It looks like we're going to be using a 14-inch shock. So we're going to go in the catalog, we're going to look what they got. We can get a shock that uses a bar mounted on the bottom, an eyelet in the top, and it's going to be 14 inches from eye to eye, and hopefully that'll work out for us. So this is where I'm going to wrap it up for tonight. I feel like we made massive progress on this truck. We got the turbo setup almost completely done. I just got to finish welding a few pieces of that out. We got the rear end sitting kind of where we want it to be. We're plugging away. This thing is really coming along. I'm hoping to get this thing ready, at least preliminarily, for a show, hopefully in June. I don't know. It's pretty ambitious, but we're going to see what we can do. And we're just going to keep plugging away. So I still have a lot of fab work left on this chassis. It should go pretty quickly once we get rolling on it. But I don't want to reinforce any of the top plates or finish weld any of this until we get the coilovers figured out, because I want to make sure all that's integrated. It's nice and strong. We might do, since this was cut up all apart, we might do some stiffening between here and there. I want to make sure this frame is as solid as it can be. To me, on a truck this light, it doesn't hurt to put extra bars and plates and gussets in. It really can only be a benefit. So, like I said, that's it. I'm going to wrap it up here for tonight. As always, guys, like, subscribe, and thanks for watching In the Shop.